Hello everybody, I'm Jedi-Alexis and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about how I made my Ahsoka headpiece. Hopefully she fits completely in the frame. So I've been getting a lot of requests from you guys on my Instagram to make a tutorial on how I made this. This is going to be more of a walkthrough because every time I pulled my camera out to film my process of making this, I would screw up on what I was working on and start swearing and everything else, so I just didn't film it, but I did take lots of pictures. So we're going to be talking about how I made this today. Excuse the gross stand that's made from cardboard and PLA filament rolls. Excuse that. So yeah, let's get right into it. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make a base for the leku and the montrals to sit on. So what I did was I put my hair up in my wig cap, or wig caps I should say, and I just wrapped my head with plastic wrap, so food safe wrap that you could find in your household, or just any sort of plastic cling wrap. And from there, I duct taped it, put duct tape all over the cap to cover every inch of the plastic, making sure that there's no plastic showing. You want it all duct tape. And I used one layer, except for around the ears and in the very back. I used about 2 layers, just so that there was more stability. But in the front and on the top, I only used 1 layer. After you have your entire cap covered, you're going to want to keep the cap on for this. You're going to want to draw a line from about a 2-inch line from the middle of your head down to where your hairline is. Take it off, cut that slit, put it back on, and then you're going to trace out your ears. Then you're going to want to take the cap off again and cut out the ears. Once you have that, now you can get started onto making the pattern for the montrals. So there are 2 methods to making the montrals after you have your pattern. But before we get into that, I'll talk about actually making the pattern. You can go about it many different ways. You can use Photoshop, Microsoft PowerPoint, you can even use Paint, just to get the scaling and the size right so it looks proportionate to your head. I actually got mine sized by a fellow Ahsoka cosplayer. Call me Snips. She helped me a lot with this entire headpiece making process. So once you have your pattern, there's 2 ways that you can go about it. The first method is you can trace your pattern onto cardboard. And I also forgot to mention, you only want the montral portion. So that's from about here up. So you're going to want to cut off the 3rd stripe going up and take the leku and leave it aside for now. But you can take the montral pattern and trace it onto cardboard and then hot glue it in place. Once that's done, you can spray it with expanding foam, and then once it's hardened and cured, sculpt it and carve it into the montral shape. I did not do that because, to be honest, I am terrible at carving and sculpting, and I knew I would screw up royally and it would take me longer to make. So the method that I used was I took my pattern and I traced it out, only half. I traced it out onto 1/2-inch thick upholstery foam. Once I had that done, I then did a puppetry stitch called the Henson stitch, or the ladder stitch, up the seam, and then hot glued each montral into place. And then once I figured out where they needed to be, I took an extra scrap piece and then glued the front and back, just so that they'd meet because there was a gap. To make the lekus, so both front and the back, I again used the pattern that I cut out from the montrals for the front leku, and I transferred them onto both batting, quilting batting, and interfacing, and then I sewed those together using the exact same stitch, which is the Henson stitch, and then stuffed them with pillow stuffing and hot glued them in place. The reason why I did that is so that they're actually flexible, so that they move when I move, which is great for when you're doing poses that you have to turn your head and move, or if there's someone talking to you. But since her leku is quite short, it does hinder your movement a little bit because it doesn't really turn inward, but it does turn, like, it flips, but it doesn't, it's got no give when you turn your head. So that's the only downside with that, but you can still move fairly well. For the back leku, I actually went into PowerPoint and took a screen cap picture that I had of Ahsoka's back leku. I sized it, and I sized it way too big for a reason, because I wanted this to fit me. So I cut it out of the quilting batting once I had my pattern printed, and then from there it was, I just cut away at it to get the proper shape and length and, well, width that I actually needed. And then same process as the front, quilting batting, interfacing, pillow stuffing, hot glued on, no big deal. And now for the hardest part of this entire headpiece is draping this thing in spandex. It is the hardest thing to do, and it's the worst part to do. It took me a good week to get it properly draped, especially when I had to drape the back piece, which was a nightmare and a half. But all in all, it's, you know, fairly easy to do. You just have to make sure, because if you do make the mantril bits out of upholstery foam, when you drape the fabric, spandex is a very lightweight fabric, but when you have like 3 yards of it, it becomes super heavy. And so what it did was it dragged the mantrils down, and it dragged them down, and so then I had to go back up to my top seam here and re-stitch it all, and pull them tighter so that they would perk back up so that they're not drooping way down here. So after I had it all sewed, I actually hand-stitched this entire thing. I would not recommend hand-stitching it. I would recommend, after you do the spandex and you drape it, you pin it, mark it with a pencil or chalk or whatever, take it off the headpiece, and go sew it with a sewing machine. I recommend you do that because even though I did the Henson stitch all the way through, and I did it very slowly to make sure that it didn't get ripples, I still got a ton of ripples, and luckily all my seams, I made them so that, especially on the leku, they were all in the very back so that you wouldn't be able to see them. But, you know, it took a lot of layers of latex to fix those seams, especially on the back leku. I couldn't cover up the entire seam, but I left some of it because it made it look like, it actually made it look like skin texture, which was really nice. But, yeah, I would recommend you sew the spandex on a sewing machine. It saves you a lot of time, and it'll save you a lot of latex, too. So, speaking of latex, that is the next step. Once you have your spandex sewed on, you're then going to want to cover it with latex. And it just depends on, you know, how good your sewing job was on how many layers of latex you needed. The whole thing itself got about 4 coats of latex, and then in other areas, especially on the seams, or on some of the seams, or not seams, or on some of the spots right in here, where my latex got a bit too hot and started to burn and bubble, I put a lot on there to try and cover up most of those bubbles. And pro tip, do not, if you live in a hot environment, do not liquid latex outside when it's hotter than 25 degrees Celsius outside. Your latex will bubble and burn. I was doing mine in the garage in late June, it was 25 plus degrees outside, and so my garage was naturally 25 degrees plus, and my latex, especially in the front here, started to burn and bubble because it was so hot. So I would definitely recommend, if it's hotter than 20 degrees, do it indoors or make yourself like a little booth where it's cool and do your liquid latex, because if it's too hot, it burns and bubbles and you get gross textures, and it's impossible to cover those up without adding more latex. So in total for layers, I used half a bottle of latex for this entire headpiece. This is just the Clone Wars headpiece. I'm scared to do the Rebels headpiece for how much latex I had to use. But yes, once it's covered in latex, let the latex dry for at least a day, just to make sure everything's cured and dry. Once it's dry, you can then go on to painting. What I did for the base layer of white, which in some areas I need to redo now that I'm looking at it, I just covered the entire thing with about 4 coats of white Plasti-Dip because it's flexible and it's not going to chip, but apparently it's not super waterproof. So if it's raining outside or torrential downpouring outside, make sure you have an umbrella, because I had this headpiece in the rain twice, and I can tell that some of my white has either discolored or it's coming off, especially way back in here. But yes. And then for the blue stripes, you can make a template or you can just draw them on. I drew mine on with a pencil. Make sure it's not a sharp pencil, but a pencil. And then you're going to want to go over them. If your lines are super light, go over them with a blue ballpoint pen. That's what I did. It just made my lines brighter, and it doesn't matter if you don't cover up the pen lines where your outlines are, because the blue paint's going to cover it up anyways. For the blue paint, you're going to want to use a mixture of acrylic paint and latex. You're not going to want a whole lot, just like a quick pour, just so that the paint doesn't chip and so that it is flexible. And for the blue, I used about 4 different colors of blue to get this color. I used Payne's Gray, Copperhagen Blue. I used another blue, but it didn't have a name on it of what the shade was. But I'll list all the paint colors in the description below, so that you guys can, decide on, what colors paints that you need, or find the variant of those paints to where you live. So now moving on to the headdress. These her cool teeth, which need to be re-glued, these are made from craft foam. I cut them out. I scored the underside where the just to get the pyramid diamond looking shape, and then I hot glued those scored edges folded. And then to prime them so that they're not soft and squishy, I just covered them with about 4 layers of wood glue, and it covered up the foam texture and everything. And then I just hot glued them in place because I'm not using this headpiece for any other Ahsoka except for Clone Wars Season 3 to 5 Ahsoka. But if you want to make Slave Ahsoka from Season 4, what you could do for her cool teeth is put magnets both on her headdress and on the headpiece so that they're removable and you can take them on and off. But I just use hot glue because it's easy to fix, it does its job. And now for the last piece of this whole entire headpiece is her Padawan braid, or the Silka beads as they're called in the canon lore. These beads were a pain in the butt to find. Not so much the circular beads, but the diamond beads. They were really hard to find, and I think my local Michael's store hates me because I would come in every week and buy them out of these diamond beads because they were the only ones that they had. But they're really nice because they have like this Celtic design, and I thought that that would really suit Ahsoka, being as she is a Togruta, and the Togruta are a very peaceful people, and they like art, and so it just kind of fit. So yeah, I bought Michaels out every week of these beads, just so that I had enough for Ahsoka, and I think I probably have enough that if I need to remake this headpiece or remake the beads, that I could probably pull it off. Or if I was to even make Clone Wars Season 1 to 2 Ahsoka, I'd have enough to remake them all. And so, let's just turn it around here. So they wrap around in the back, and I just used some fishing wire to bead them all on here, and then I just tied it in the back. I didn't really care when it came to that part. I know some people, they glue them to the back, or they use duct tape and just stick it to the back. Me, I just tied it, whatever. But my favorite part of this entire headpiece is the Padawan braid, because I got this neat trick, again, from Call Me Snips, and it's attached with a gold jewelry beading magnet thing that's tarnishing because it got wet. That's fine. Gives it some weather and some texture. Makes it look like it's been used. I might need to re-hot glue that. Anyways, just put Ahsoka down there. So this is her Padawan braid. The triangle beads, I actually had to make these out of polymer clay because I could not find, for the life of me, triangle beads. I couldn't even find glass beads that were in a triangle. I only found, like, the really weird beads that they say they're triangle beads, but they're not. So, yeah, here's her Padawan braid, and it just clips on, which is really nice, because now I can convince one of my friends to cosplay as Anakin. We can recreate that scene when she gives him the Padawan braid back. So powerful. So, that is it for my Ahsoka headpiece tutorial, walkthrough, video thing. I'm sorry I didn't have any actual video footage of me making this, but I do have photos. I will find a way to share them with you guys, even if it means putting them onto a Google Docs or something and just making it public for you guys to view. I'll have to see about doing that. And thank you guys for watching. Thank you for being so patient with me. I know I was supposed to film this months ago, and I just didn't have time, and now I finally have time to film it. So if you have any questions or comments, leave them down in the comment section below, or you can message me on Instagram, and I will try to answer all your questions as quickly as I can. But thank you all for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more content, because I do have some interesting videos coming very soon to my channel. So stay tuned for that, and we will see you guys in the next video.